Aaron, we are in one of the most iconic locations in the history of our Jewish people, maybe even the history of the world.
That's right.
Jerusalem, the western retaining wall of the Second Temple. You came to Jerusalem seeking to get closer to God, and yet you became a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, who could believe it?
Who would have thought? Take me to the moment that you recognized Jesus for who he was.
I came to Jerusalem for the first time in my life to draw close to the Lord, and I felt like I kept moving further and further away from him when I first moved here. It took me to go all the way to the west coast of the United States before I started to really start asking those deeper questions. That journey started me back here in Jerusalem asking, who are you, God? Could it be that this Messiah is Jesus? And so for me, that was really a journey that went from, in some ways, a searching to a moving further and further away from God to a finding him again here in this city.
Wow. Happened a little bit like that for me. Take us on that journey.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
So my parents, they relocated to Israel when I was 15. And as a 15-year-old, you go places with your parents, you're just trying to fit in.
Right.
So for me, it was a bit unclear exactly what it meant to be Jewish, how I fit into this country. I didn't speak Hebrew, having to learn Hebrew, learning Jewish customs, learning Jewish traditions. I actually ended up attending a yeshiva in this city.
Wow.
Not in this particular neighborhood, but in another neighborhood.
Yeah.
And was studying Torah, Talmud, Gemara, Pirkei Avot, all these different Jewish writings. And I kept having these very basic questions for the rabbis, like, what does God want from us? They'd be like, he wants you to keep Torah. And I'd be like, yeah, but really, is that what the creator of the universe, what does he want from me? And they'd be like, look, you're a Jew, Aaron. You've got these commandments, learn them, understand them. That's what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
And so it was a journey for me because I didn't feel satisfied. I was in yeshiva, I'm doing all the commandments, but something still felt missing.
Really?
And I had other questions like, what does God want to do with the other 6 billion people in the world? And
Right.
they go, well, you're Jewish, worry about you, don't worry about them. Somehow it didn't resonate with me. And so I found myself, rather than drawing closer to the Lord, that's why I think about it, these thousands of people who come here, they're coming to draw closer.
That's right.
Closer to the Lord. That's
right.
why they want to touch this wall. That's why they want to put a prayer right there. And for me, it was a feeling of moving further away from God. When I was 18, at the end of that year, I was drafted into the IDF, and I had some intense experiences. I found myself just during that season, just wanting to move further and further away from Israel, from being Israeli. I had this daydream of like, I'm gonna go back to America, and that's where all the answers will, I'll find everything there. During that time, one of my closest friends from the yeshiva was kidnapped. He was tortured and killed by Hamas. Yeah. And so as a young Jewish Israeli guy, doesn't even know if he believes in God, I started to become more and more bitter, more and more angry, not only at Palestinians, but at God. Like, could God allow this to happen? Why would he bring us back here?
The question of suffering.
Right. And it was, for me, it just didn't add up. I didn't understand it. And none of the questions I felt were resolved in the yeshiva. So I saved up enough money to get out of Dodge, essentially. And I left Jerusalem, I left Israel, and I went to the United States. And it was when I was in the United States that I kept encountering these Christians. These people kept coming to me. And it was one of them that challenged me to read the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament. And that's when everything changed.
I like that you said that, because when people like us come to faith in Jesus, they say, but why not Judaism? Why didn't you go try that first? But you did.
I did.
And you gave it your all.
I really tried.
And you asked the hard questions, and you weren't satisfied.
Well, we were living in a completely Orthodox environment as well. My whole family was. So for us, it was like Orthodox life. I mean, literally from the morning to the night, to when you go to bed.
Yeah.
Everything was really dictated by our religious, experience at that point. And so for me, walking away from that, I didn't know where else to go.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, when people ask me, what do you believe? These Christians walk up, I'd be like, I don't believe in God. I don't think he even exists.
Okay.
I don't know. So for me, that's the journey I took, was believing in God, observing all the commandments, trying to do everything I could possibly do to complete unbelief in God, and even thinking there's no spiritual realm.
What is the thing that starts to lead you towards an understanding that Jesus actually could be for our Jewish people?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, when I traveled back to the United States on this trip, I spent a year on the road I was influenced by a bunch of Jack Kerouac stuff, you know, I was on the road and Dharma Bums and all these books, which is all about really experiencing life to its fullest.
Yeah.
And I thought that's where truth lied, right? Experiencing life to its fullest. So I traveled to the West Coast, I traveled to Mexico, Canada, I was in Arizona, I'd go to these, you know, festivals, whatever, like rainbow gatherings. I remember I was kind of like a hippie at that time, just doing whatever. And I kept picking up books along the way. People would hand me stuff and maybe this is the answer. Maybe meditation's the answer.
Yeah, I went there.
Maybe, you know, the new age stuff. I read stuff like that. I was, you know, reading stuff from the Hare Krishnas they give me. I was reading Nietzsche, you know, just all kinds of things like that. And I remember somebody challenged me to consider Jesus and they said to me, have you ever read the New Testament, Aaron? I said, honestly, not really. Why would I read that? I've been to the Jewish thing, done that. Why would I do now the Jesus thing?
Right. It's religion, you know, the religious.
Yeah, it's just, it's not for me.
Yeah.
I said, you know, Aaron, as a Jew, I think the New Testament is going to give you the answers you're looking for. I didn't know what to say.
Right.
So I started reading, and I will tell you, the pages were explosive to me. The words of Jesus were penetrating just right into my heart.
Give me something. Give me what touched you?
I remember reading how Jesus interacted with the rabbis and so many of the things that he was saying and how he put the emphasis on loving your neighbor as yourself and loving the Lord your God with all your heart. And not on all the little specific letter of the law things. You know, even something like Shabbat. Man wasn't made for Shabbat, right? Shabbat was for us. You know, God loves us. And that idea of God loving me, it was like, what? You know, honestly, man, it brings tears to my eyes to think about it now. And I mean, just reading how Jesus loved us and how he loved these disciples, and you kind of see them fumbling and getting it wrong. I remember at one point just praying to God here in this city.
Yeah.
I was in the United States for a year. I'd started reading the New Testament, and I was in Independence Park, Gan Ha'atzmaut, here in the city. I remember I'm sitting there on a bench. I just cry out to God. I don't know where else to go. I don't know who to turn to, but this Jesus that I'm reading about, I really want him to be the Messiah, you know? And, you know, just reading that and saying, but I don't know how to follow him. I'm the worst follower. I mean,
what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? You know?
Yeah, what do I do? How do I walk? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to turn.
How am I supposed to put my hands, you know?
It was like, where do I start, you know? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking in my mind a picture of what a follower of Jesus looks like. And the picture I had is these nice, well-dressed people in churches, you know. I'm thinking, I don't fit that mold. You know, I'm this hippie guy. There's no way. I'm not that guy. How's this even gonna look? And so I start to basically pray, God, if you want me to follow you, there's two things that really need to happen. One, you're gonna have to help me because I have no idea what to do next. So if you want me to do this.
Love it. So personal.
I don't know what else to do. And
so personal, that connection between God and man.
Also, I'm praying for, because you got recited prayers in the yeshiva and all this. I'm going all the mornings, sidurs.
And when we look in the Tanakh, we see the giants of the Bible praying personally and intimately towards God without a book.
Absolutely. And they're just calling out.
Yeah.
They're calling out to God.
Talking to him.
You see all these examples of people just calling out to God. And so that was me. I was just calling out to God. I remember saying, if I'm sitting in this park and nothing's changed in a year, I honestly don't know if I'm going to make it to 25.
Wow.
I mean, it was that life or death at that moment, it felt like to me. And I remember making these two conditions. I was so naive, you know, I'm just like, God of all creation, if I'm going to do this for you, you know. And then I asked him, I said, you're going to have to help me figure this out, number one. And number two, I got these two guys. They're my two best friends. They're both Israeli guys. One of them lives near Bethlehem. One of them lives in another settlement somewhere else. They both grew up in very observant Jewish homes. If I become a believer, I want them to also follow you and become believers, because otherwise it won't work.
That's a big request.
It was a big ask.
Yeah.
And I shared with them, and I remember they were like, heck no, there's no way, what are you talking about? One of them was like, even if Jesus is the Messiah, which he's not, even if you could prove it up and down, even if the prophecies were all pointing to him, I'd never accept it.
Yeah.
And I remember asking the Lord that, and those two prayers he answered. Those two friends of mine became believers in Jesus. We were reading the Bible together hours on end here in Jerusalem.
You're kidding me.
Walking the streets. This is where it happened. Yeah, we're studying the New Testament together. It was amazing, both of them. The second thing, and I remember being like, you're going to have to help me follow you. I was reading through the book of Matthew. And I remember at the very end, he says, here's what I want you to do, guys, right? He gives them this great commission, right? I want you to go out. I want you to make disciples. And then there's this verse at the end. He says, you know how you're going to do it? I'm going to be with you to the very end of the age. That was it for me. Jesus isn't dead. He's not in the ground. He's alive.
Yeah.
And not only is he alive, he's with me. And he's going to be with me to the very end of the age.
The God that sees us.
Oh, yeah.
Gives us what we need and walks with us. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So it was at that point that Jesus is answering these questions. I'm feeling like I've made these requests. I'm experiencing what I'm reading about in the Bible. I mean, I've got joy like I've never experienced.
Yeah.
All these things I was
I
wrestling
testify
with.
to that one.
You know about that.
Woo.
Yeah, and I mean, all this stuff that I was carrying with me, I just felt like God was like, I mean, little by little, I mean, there were all kinds of things. I had a lot of rough edges.
Yeah.
I mean, literally. And there was nobody telling me, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. You know, I had a girlfriend at the time, all this. Suddenly I'm like, I don't need this anymore. I don't need this anymore. Nobody told me, you know, I mean, there were drugs, there were different things. All of it just fell away. I had no interest. It was like overnight, it was a miracle.
Wow.
I just had zero interest. And God's word was alive to me. I just couldn't stop reading it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I just said, this is real. You're the Messiah. You're alive today. Help me follow you. You know, I need you in my life. Forgive me. I'm a mess.
So Aaron, you've come to faith. Your life is completely changed. He's changing you from the inside out, giving you the new heart and new spirit promised to us in the Tanakh,
Absolutely.
in Ezekiel. You come back to Israel.
Yep.
What happens now?
So I'm trying to figure all this out. I still had a lot of bitterness.
Okay.
And, you know, from that friend of mine being killed, and I knew somebody else who was killed, and I'm wrestling through all that. And I'm like, this is a God of love. I can't hang on to this. What do I do about it? So I heard about this congregation. It was a church called, I believe at the time, the Jerusalem Church, run by a pastor named Issam Hussein. And he was a doctor who had become a believer in Jesus. And he had a church here. And his church was full of former Muslims, guys that, you know, come from Muslim backgrounds and had radical experiences encountering the living God and meeting this Jesus, and their hearts were changed. So I thought to myself, okay, if this Jesus truly is who he says he is, and this power of reconciliation that we read about here in the New Testament is true, I should be able to walk in there.
That's right.
They should be my brothers, right? Okay. And so I remember Sunday morning going to this church, wandering through these little streets here in the old city, going to this little doorway. I'm thinking, do I got the right place here? I go inside and there's all these people down there, Arabs, and they stop. Everything just stops. And they look at me. They know I'm not Arab, okay? I walk in. Is this the Jerusalem church? Yes, it is. Who are you? My name is Aaron. I'm Jewish. I believe in Jesus. Immediately, Pastor Hussein comes up, gives me this big, just embraces me like this.
Wow.
And he just welcomed me. And I was worshiping. I mean, there were tears. I remember just thinking, this is true. This isn't just like words on a page. This is life-changing. Their lives were changed. My life was changed. And it was like all that bitterness and stuff, it just like, it was like peeling off of me. And I suddenly found myself having a heart and a love for these people. And I stayed in touch with Issam. He was one of the people who actually ministered to me. Eventually, I met my wife, and he performed our wedding.
No
yeah.
way.
And then when I joined Jews for Jesus, this is the funniest thing. When I joined Jews for Jesus, we have this application process, and they say, put a pastor's reference down there. I listed him. I remember one of the staff who called me, they're like, your pastor reference says Issam Hussein, who's this guy? Right? So I have to tell the story, and they're blown away by it.
Wow. Wow, reconciliation between people groups.
Absolutely.
Because it's more than just getting together and playing Frisbee.
Yes.
It's a change of heart that has to happen to both nations so that they can come together as one under God.
And I'm firmly convinced that without the gospel, those two things are so complicated and difficult. Right. And it's not that with the gospel they're not complicated, but with the gospel there's a spiritual component where God changes hearts.
That's right. You need that change of heart. Otherwise it's behavior modification and let me try.
Yeah.
And it's not in our power.
Yeah.
And that's why we struggle so hard and for so long over the decades to get along as people groups, is because we're trying in our own power.
Yeah,
And it doesn't work.
absolutely.
It doesn't work because God can bring us all together.
It's totally true.
Woo! So what are you doing now?
So God gave me this amazing blessing of being able to serve with a ministry of Jews for Jesus.
What is Jews for Jesus? Because
Yeah.
a lot of people are hearing Jews for Jesus around the world, Jews for Jesus popping up, Jews for Jesus popping up. You know, our videos are being watched by the
Yep.
world. Jewish people are watching these videos.
Yeah.
And they have an idea of what that might mean. You
Yep.
tell us what it means.
Yeah. Well, Jews for Jesus in its simplest form are Jews who have discovered their Messiah, Jesus, and they follow him with their whole heart. It looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes you might find somebody who's a Jewish believer in Jesus and just call them Jews for Jesus.
Yeah.
But there's also an organization called Jews for Jesus. And we actually go out, connect with people, dialogue with people, have conversations with people who are spiritually searching like I was, who are just asking deeper questions. And if they want to interact, they want to connect, they want to find out more, that's why we're here.
Right.
That's what we want to do. And we invite them to do that.
Amazing. So why don't you just call yourself Christians?
Right? Well, I mean, why didn't Jesus or, you know, those guys that followed him first call themselves Christians?
Great
I mean,
point.
You know, obviously the first followers of Jesus, they were Jews. And
That's
for
right.
them, they were waiting for the Jewish Messiah.
Jesus says, you will be my
Witnesses.
witnesses. Where?
In Judea.
In Jerusalem,
Yeah.
Judea, Samaria,
That's right.
and the rest of
And
the
the
world.
rest of the world.
First here,
That's right.
to the Jews first.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so for them, it wasn't non-Jewish.
Right.
In fact, you know, it was strange for non-Jews to follow this
That's
Jewish.
right. That was the question of the day. How can you be a Gentile and believe in our Jewish Messiah?
That's right.
Don't you have to become Jewish?
Absolutely. And so when people ask me, you know, why don't you call yourself a Christian? I go, well, the word Christian or Mishichi
Right.
in Hebrew is a follower of the Messiah. So
That's right.
technically, I am a Christian. But I also like to tell people I'm also 100% Jewish.
right.
I was raised Jewish. I have Jewish family. I have Jewish history.
Right.
And ultimately, I believe I have a Jewish faith.
That's right. That's right. Amen. Bro,
right.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Here in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
no better place to share this
Yeah.
than here where it all went down.
Yeah.
I'm inspired,
Thanks, Jeff.
and we hope you're inspired too.
Yeah.
If you like this kind of content, you want to get in touch with Jews for Jesus, we have our contact down in the description. If you want to get in touch with Aaron, send us an email. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and leave your comments below. God bless you all.